Well, welcome everybody. When I got in the room just like 15 minutes ago, I wasn't expecting this much people in here. So when I got into the conference venue yesterday, the first thing I did was check out this room to see where I would be presenting. And I thought, wow, that's a big room. And then somebody told me this was actually one of the smaller rooms. So thanks for joining my session. It's about being a lead software developer. And it's something that I have been doing for a while. First, a little bit of an introduction about myself. I'm an iOS developer relations lead at the company I currently work, Stream. I'll tell a little bit about that in a small bit. I also run a podcast for iOS developers. It's called AppForce One. And I sort of wrote a book about being a lead software developer. Something that happened during the pandemic. I had some time on my hands and decided to write down some of my experiences in my current role back then. So I've been doing software development for over 20 years. I started in 2002. I'm currently an iOS developer, but back in the day, I actually got certified as a Microsoft Certified Application Developer for ASP 1.1. Who still remembers that? Well, quite a few people actually. And yeah, the question is, why do I get to talk about being a lead software developer? Well, as I already shared a little bit, basically I got the job. I was working at a big insurance company in the Netherlands, a team of, I think, 40 people, and 9 of those were iOS developers. And at some point, because I was the individual with the highest compensation, they told me, hey, you got the highest compensation, you be the lead software developer of this team. So I was like, okay. I've been doing software development for over 17 years back then, but still being in charge of a group of people, having to do other things than just writing code, being familiar with things that the business concerns themselves about, it was all new for me then. Of course, you had some inclination of what you should be doing, but still then, the first day you got started, and then it's a matter of no screen anymore. So then it's a matter of trying to figure out what's going on. I think it's not on my end here that's going wrong. So we got tech support. That's something you don't do as a lead software developer. It should be good, right?
I'll stick around.
Yeah. So, okay, don't touch anything now, because apparently it's some cable connection here. So. It's this pile here, you can't see it, but I'll just stay away from it now. So I got the job of being a lead software developer, and what this basically means to me, I will explain a little bit. So as I already shared, I wrote a sort of a book about my experiences. This is the cover. There will be a nice QR code at the end of my presentation that you can hopefully scan from the back of the room as well, so that you land up a landing page and then you can have a look at it yourself, see if it's something you like. As I mentioned, I'm the iOS developer relations lead at Stream. Stream is an API that creates a chat infrastructure. So if you want to have a chat implemented in your application or website or whatever, we can get you that within like days instead of months. So come talk to me afterwards. I think you'll like it because chat and social interaction is a big thing nowadays with online products. And yeah, we can get you started with an easy, no credit card required trial. There's also a maker account if you are like a smaller individual doing like a small app. We also like to support those people, and then you have like a prolonged free tier that you can use without having to pay anything. We have a number of companies that trust us. I always like, especially since we're now getting back to in-person events again, the Hopin one there at the top. Most of you have probably already been on the Hopin platform for some sort of a virtual online conference, and the chat infrastructure with this product is actually created by Stream. Of course, we're hiring. So I don't know, we have roles in Golang, .NET, C#, Android, iOS, Flutter, React Native, anything you can come up with. We are looking for people. We have an Amsterdam and a Denver-based office. So let's get started. What is a lead software developer? It's a lot of things actually, because besides your regular work as software developer, writing code, making sure that specifications get implemented and that you do that to the highest quality that you are able. There's also a number of additional roles you have to take into account because as a lead software developer, the name implies it already, there's some leadership going on there. So if you look at the people that you're working with, I always like to say that I work with people instead of that I manage people. One of the most important things, I think, as a lead software developer is that you have to make sure that the people you're working with, so that's the developers, that they are growing professionally. And that means that they get better at their job, that they get better as an individual in the workplace, and that they just get better at being part of your team. Because as we all know, software development is complex. We get to do with all these specifications, agile workflows, making sure that that everybody is happy, basically, the end users, but also the business sponsors. So there's a lot of things you have to keep going as a software developer. And as I already mentioned, working with a group of people is what it's about. But sometimes you have to make the hard decisions when needed. Because I always like that people, as a group, decide on things amongst themselves. So more based on, I wouldn't call it a democracy because there are some other aspects involved that make sure that you can't call it a true democracy, but sometimes you get in this situation that a decision needs to be made on a technical level, and then as a lead, it's on you to either say we go left or we go right. So that's also, I think, a big part of being a lead software developer. And yeah, sometimes you just make the wrong decisions, right? And then also you have to be able to stand for those mistakes you might have made and also be able to explain yourself and make sure that you can also move forward from that problem that you might have created back then. Also, of course, as a software developer, you're hired by either a business or a non-profit or at least some entity that wants you to do something for them so that they can achieve their goals. I think most of us, we are working at for-profit companies. So it's very clearly the business, they have a goal, they create a product. The main goal is to make money, and they do that through a product that is in part created by us as software developers. And as a lead software developer, you have to be very much more aware of what the goals the business is trying to achieve. For instance, if you are working at, if you're working at Stream, where I work, we create a nice SDK. It's all technically very sound, but the goal of the company is not to sell the SDK, it's to sell the usage of the platform that you can access through the SDK. So the true product is not the SDK, it's the platform. So the SDK, you have to understand, for me at least as an iOS developer, that the SDK is a means to an end. And any mistakes or any problems that are in this SDK, they hinder the adoption of our actual service, the actual thing that we're trying to sell. So being aware as a software developer of what the business really is trying to sell to the marketplace, so to the individuals giving the business money, really think about that every once in a while, because you quite often discover that the thing that you are working on, it might actually be the core product of the company, or it is something that is very important still, but it is in support of the business goals. And quite often, what people on first inclination think is the important thing for the business is quite often just a little bit different. And just being aware of that difference is something you have to be extra good at as a lead software developer, because as a lead software developer, you're a sort of a translation layer between a group of developers and people who think in terms of business. So, of course, every developer needs to deal with specifications, but you need to make sure, and you need to check in with the leadership of the company or your business sponsor or anybody who tells you you need to create something. You need to be able to, first of all, tell them whether or not it's technically a good idea. And second of all, you have to be sure that what they are asking is possible. And third, you have to make sure that the group of developers implementing that they have a chance of understanding what is being requested of them so that you actually build and create what the business wants you to create, because in the end, they are paying you money for it, right? But also, you have a responsibility in the other direction, because now I first of all talked a lot about business, but you are a lead software developer, so there's a number of people you work with, and I think because you're in a sort of a leadership position, it is also very important that you protect those people from the business in some sense. It sounds a bit harsh, but Quite often with software development, as we all know, there are expectations, and expectations, well, my experience, expectations are always wrong, because it's always more or less what you're able to deliver. And most of all, you want to protect people from death marches, because if you promise to deliver something in a specific time frame, and you know ahead of time that it's impossible, you're ending up with what's called a death march. You can look it up online. It's a terminology that's being used in software development, I think, for decades now. And you don't want to be in that situation, because then it's on you that you are delivering something which you cannot achieve. And why would you want to work on something that is impossible, right? I don't like it, because it's just set up for failure. So as I mentioned, you have to make sure that as a lead that you are able to talk about quality standards, because first of all, you are a software developer, you are a technical individual, you know what software development is, you know what quality of software is, you know what technical debt is, you know how to make sure what processes and what practices you need to implement to make sure that the actual end product, so that's the piece of software, is of a decent enough quality. I always like to think of that the quality of the things that I create is excellent, but then hindsight kicks in, and then you notice that, yeah, there's some bugs in there still, and we need to fix those. But you want to be sure that you can detect those, because any software developer that claims that they can write flawless code, they're lying. But what you need to do there, because you are in the lead, you are the example for a group of software developers, you need to make sure that everybody adheres to the quality standards that you as a team have agreed upon. So that's the typical things like amounts of unit test coverage, if that's a metric that you measure, but also the fact that you actually do unit testing, what other kinds of testing automated that you have in place, what are the practices in like making sure that something that you have, sometimes as software developers you have this switch plane that you think, okay, I'm doing this manually, okay, and now I need to make sure that I start automating this. So I always like the 3 strikes and it's out principle. If I do something manually 3 times over, then the 3rd time I will make sure that I do this automated or scripted or in some way, in a way that it's not a manual thing I have to do again and again and again anymore. Because I don't know about you, but repetition, it's amazing, especially if it's automated. Because then you can't make mistakes anymore, or at least you're making the same mistake over and over and over again, exactly the same, so you can fix it. So that also means that you have to be able to talk about good principles of software design. So that's what's a good architecture in the field, the specific niche that you're working on. Because I'm an iOS developer, and I know for sure what most of you are doing with, I guess, Microsoft technology is a little bit different to what I am used to. But each field has their own architectural patterns. Each field has their own ways of solving specific problems, and being aware of what is the good design pattern to use for specific problems is, for instance, something you have to be able to explain, and it has to be something that you have to transfer to team members that you're working with, because quality is not only the way you do things, but also the way that you solve things, because it's the things you do every day, but also the plan, what you're working with. So I don't know, when I'm doing software development, quite often I start with like this exploratory process. You know, you just open up your editor and you just start typing, you start basically implementing something, but it's really just a bit of throwaway code, just getting the ideas right, getting a grasp of how an API works, how a framework works, so that I have a basis to start working with. But once I've done that, I step back, I pick a piece of paper, a whiteboard, don't care, something that is like somewhat visual, that is easily adjustable, then it creates sort of like a design for what I'm trying to create. And sometimes it's just 3 boxes with some lines between it. Sometimes it's like a whiteboard full of all kinds of boxes and crazy stuff that if I look back at it a day later, I can think like, I don't even know who wrote this, but it must be me because I remember doing this. But stepping back, thinking about how things should look, that's a very important aspect of being a lead software developer, and I think something that you can help a team of individuals with by making sure that basically when somebody starts in your team working on something, asking the question, hey, what's the design you're working with? How is this going to look conceptually? Ask those questions. Make sure that people are actually thinking about what they're doing instead of just doing it, because it's so easy, especially with web development, to have like a browser open, have some source, type away, add something, you see it, add something more, you see it, keep on going, iterating. Really quick process, but then in the end you have a big heap of code, but where's the structure, right? And you can do that with iOS development as well, because I've seen crazy messes that they work on first glance, but if you start looking and digging in the code, you get scared. You'll start thinking, oh wow, what was this person thinking when creating this? Were they actually thinking along some sort of a pattern, some sort of a line of sort of like a train of thought and architecture that they were implementing? Also, because you're working with a group of people who are doing all kinds of things, you have these business sponsors, they think, yeah, but I want features, I want implemented pieces of specification. And you need to be able to explain why certain things that on first glance are not obviously productive, why it is important to keep on doing those things. So it's important to explain why you are writing unit tests sometimes in some organizations. It's important to explain why you take the time to step back and not be at your desk typing away in the software IDE or your favorite editor, because of course that's all a preference that we have as a software developer. So you need to be able to explain that. And most of all, I think, of course, you have test engineers, you have people dedicated to testing, but on the software development end, I think the lead software developer is one of the most important individuals that sets the stage on what the acceptable level of quality within a project is, because you are giving the biggest example of how things should be done. Because an important aspect of being a lead software developer is to practice what you preach. Because if you tell somebody that you need to do some sort of testing to a certain extent and to some level, you damn well make sure that you do it yourself as well, because otherwise, what's the point of actually telling somebody to do something if you're not even doing it yourself, right? So that's an important aspect as well. You act as an example for your team. So it's not that you should be like the best software developer out there, because if you're lucky, you have many people in your team that are like really bright, really smart, and that can, in certain aspects of software development, run circles around you. It's great if you have those, but it's like you have to be an example in behavior, in what is, first of all, good practices as a software developer, but also what are good things to do as an individual in the workplace. Of course, everybody's different. Everybody. Some people, they're like having a chat at a coffee machine and just interacting in that way. Some people don't like it, but there are some standards in every culture on how you are supposed to behave as a professional in a work setting, right? You don't start like playing soccer down the hallway in most companies, I think, for example. Stuff like that. It's just behavior that you have to be an example of. Fortunately, you don't have to do everything. That's why you have your team for, right? Because if I try to do everything that I think a good software development team should do, that's like a fast track to burnout and a fast track to failure, because I cannot do everything just because of time. But also, there are people in my team that do specific things that I, of course, can do, but they can do it much better because they are specialized on those things. Also, what I think, there's a big difference between what a lead software developer does and what a software developer does. If you have any regular, well, not regular, everybody's special, but if you have any software developer, they think in terms of products and what they do. So you have a product at a company, and they have like an inkling of what they are supposed to do to help this product along. But if you're a lead software developer, you think, of course, in terms of the product and what the long-term growth perspective is for the team. So what the product is supposed to be looking like a year from now, if you can even think that far ahead in software terms. But also what the business might need, and also think with the business what the product could be. So it's a bit of a difference. A software developer, they look at the backlog, they pick the next story, they start working on it. But as a lead software developer, you're very much involved with some of the senior developers most likely in defining what is actually on this backlog, what is on top of the backlog. So there's a big difference there in the way that you have to think about where the product is at and where it is going, because as a software developer, you just think like one sprint ahead, and if you're like thinking more ahead, it's like you think for the rest of the quarter in broad terms. Of course, if you work truly agile, you would never work ahead in such a specific way that you have all the tickets defined yet, but you always have like an incline of where you are generally about to be going. What is the next big feature that the business would want you to implement? Is there some law change that might have some implications on your product that you need to be aware of, that you need to have ready like 6 months from now? Those kinds of things. So there's like a big difference there that you have to be very much aware of. And I think it is important that you try and educate your team, your software developers, on the bigger picture. What is the context they're working in? Because I noticed that if you can explain what the context is that somebody's working in, they can also think ahead themselves a little bit. Not that they have to do all the planning, all the defining of tickets, but they can then, of course, if they're seeing something in their day-to-day work that is not aligning with what the business or the project wants or needs down the line, they will tell you that there's an issue there. And then you can act accordingly much quicker and much sooner in the entire process. And if you've done some formal testing like this model, it's like this big V shape, the further down the bottom that you notice issues, the less cost there is involved with trying to fix things, right? So, as I mentioned, developer thinks in terms of product and what they do, and a lead thinks in terms of the product in a long-term perspective and the business. And what I always strive for as a lead software developer is this one. I took this picture from Amazon, but I got a very similar gift once when I left a project. It cracked us up significantly. But I really want people that have worked in my teams that they can afterwards look back on the things that they did, so the accomplishments that they achieved, that they have good memories of what they did with the people that they were doing this, and that there are actually some people within the team, of course, not everybody has to be friends, but that they have a group of people that they will miss afterwards. Of course, they will find a new home, they will find a new team, they will find a new environment where they hopefully can thrive. But I really like that basically when somebody leaves a project, if the feeling is somewhat bittersweet, just a little bit, then I think you did a very good job as a lead developer, because I think that's just important. So then there's often the question, is a lead software developer always a senior developer? This is, by the way, an image from a nice video that Mux.com created. You should look it up. It's quite weird, quite awkward, quite funny. I don't think a lead developer has to be the most senior developer on a team. Not by a long shot, because quite often the skill set that you need as a lead developer is so different compared to what as a normal software developer would need, that seniority is not an indication of success, because you could very well have somebody who has 20 years of software development experience and who will fail gloriously as a lead developer, because they just don't have the patience, they don't have the skills, or they don't have the desire to be a lead developer for a group of people. And I've experienced very junior developers being a lead developer in specific contexts, and that was just because of the individual. It was just such a natural fit in this position that they just took off, and they got to like getting specialized in software development in specific areas later in their career. Because quite normally you see that a software developer as a junior, they specialize in something and then they develop certain skills that they enjoy and they just find their way in that way. But this individual, he found his way, basically sort of like a bit top down, you could say. What I've noticed with junior developers is that, especially if you have a good one, is that they are very much more open to input, very much more open to suggestion, better able to listen, compared to a very senior developer who just knows how things work, who has experienced everything, who has seen it all. I've actually caught myself in that trap every once in a while as well. So Then the big question is, should you want to be a lead software developer? Well, as you already noticed, what I explained here, it really depends on your personality if you should want to do this, because there are some aspects of being a little bit away from the day-to-day coding, because I'm still coding every day, but as a lead software developer, there are other tasks that are in your schedule, other meetings you have to go to, so you will be doing less coding. So it's very much up to the individual if it's something that works well for them, and it's something you have to decide for yourself, and it's some soul searching that you have to do for yourself. I had to do that myself as well, because when I was in this position as a senior software developer, and they basically asked me, hey, do you want to be the lead of this team of individuals? I was like, I don't know, let me think about it for a week. And then after 2 days, I came back and I said, yeah, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, I want to be able to step back to my previous role. So it basically started. So now I basically explained a little bit about what I think a lead software developer is supposed to be. And now I want to dive into a number of focus areas that you can look into as a software developer. First of all, if you want to develop yourself into being a lead software developer, and also that will help you like in your day-to-day as a software developer in general, I think, because these are some skills that I ran into that if I did these practices, they really helped me along my way, along my journey. And the 3 focus areas that I'm going to talk about is basically your team, the business, and yourself, because I think those are the 3 main areas on a people level that you have to be concerned about. Of course, if you work with clients, that's somewhat part of the business, but yeah, it's something that should work well with like a mental model of seeing how things work. And I noticed that the resolution is a bit off on my slides, so this was supposed to be in the bottom right corner. So basically what this slide is about is that you, as a software developer, as a lead software developer, you have to care. You have to care about yourself, about your work, about your team members, and about the business. And so if you think about the team, as a lead, you have to make sure, as I already mentioned, so this is more like a task list, like some checkbox that you can put on your notepad every week, is that you have to make sure that everybody agrees upon the agreed upon quality standards, as I already mentioned in my introduction. You have to be able to speak about and advocate for the principles of good software design. And you can explain how any practice, why and how specific practices are done by the team. So not only do you have to be able to explain it to the developers, you have to explain it to the business as well. You have to be able to explain how to do things, and you have to be able to understand for yourself and make people understand why you do things. And you are guarding the end result, so the quality that you're looking at. And of course, the acting as a team. It feels like a recap of a bit of the previous things I talked about. So, but one of the things that's involved with that is that you have to keep tabs of your peers and your surroundings. You have to be aware of what's happening in the project, what is happening around the project, what is happening with yourself, what is happening with individuals, and that is on the work level, but also on the individual level. Because if somebody comes in, and normally this person is like the happy go-to guy, like he's like always like a force of happiness within the team, and all of a sudden he comes in all dreary, droopy, and you go like, hey, there's something off here. That's something to notice, something to talk about with somebody. And I think it's important as a lead software developer, but also as an individual, that you have regular engagement with your surroundings, with your team members. And of course, you have a formal scheduled thing for that. That's also quite often implied by some sort of department that does something with the people things, quite often horribly called human resources or something else, but hey, there needs to be a paper trail, right? But there's also the informal part, and quite often that's just what happens at the coffee machine. But and if that just doesn't happen, it's something you can like make sure that you take the time to speak to specific individuals, especially the ones that you haven't spoken with for a while. And sometimes it's more structured or more formal. You agreed in some setting that you would mentor or coach or be mentored or be coached by one of your team members. And one thing that is very important there is that you always respect boundaries and confidentiality. Because if somebody shares that, well, basically shit is up at home, first of all, you're not going to talk about that in the coffee room or in the break room. But also, if this individual indicates, okay, I said enough about that, stay away of this topic, then you have to respect that, right? And I think it's something, this informal interaction, it's something you have to do like every sprint, every week. And if you call it informal peer reviews, it's just a name, but it's really informal. It's about the two of you having an interaction and just telling each other what's going right and what could be better. But there's no paper trail. It's something that you do because you enjoy doing it, because it makes you and the other person better. And it's about connecting with each other as colleagues. So that's always very important in these settings, that you connect as human beings first and not as colleagues, because say, just ask about how the kids are doing in school, just ask what the vacation was like, stuff like that. Just get like this interaction going so that you as individuals actually glue together a bit more within the team setting. But you have to be able to agree with each other that the only thing leaving this discussion is practical steps and plans that the two of you talked about. So nothing else. It's just like, you should leave this setting fulfilled with a good conversation and some good ideas. That's if you are able to achieve that, then you had like a great informal peer review with a colleague. And as I already said, the boundaries are important. And you should do this, well, basically every 3 to 6 months, have like a good interaction with each other, that you go in depth on what has happened in the last few months and what is the plan for the next few months. And just make sure that you do this in a way that it's just comfortable for everybody involved. Of course, there's also the thing that the company wants you to do, right? And that's basically the peer review with a paper trail. And it's, well, let's just read this slide, because I think this is a good one, what Wally is doing. Because that's the best part about formal peer reviews. You quite often just get to tell HR what they should think about you if you do it right. And if you just know how these processes work, you can very much work with these processes in your advantage, I have discovered. So it is important to be aware of how certain processes, especially these ones, how they work within your company or the setting that you're working in. So as I said, it's pretty much you're talking about the same things as in an informal setting, but it's now with a paper trail, and because there's a paper trail, it is formal. You have to make it very clear that this is required by the company. So that's the paper trail. And be sure that all parties involved are aware what the process is. Quite often you have to do some paperwork ahead of time, you have to talk about it, do some more paperwork, get somebody to approve it, and then send it somewhere on some SharePoint or some mailbox or whatever. Make sure that everybody understands that and what the purpose of everything is and what the effects will be of the things that you put in those documentations. If somebody doesn't understand it, make sure to go over the process. So as I already mentioned, I really think that formal peer reviews are a form of ceremony, because anything in a formal peer review should be something that is already familiar with everybody. It's something you should have talked about already before, right? If there are surprises in a formal peer review, you did something wrong in the whole process before that. And doing a negative peer review is hard, even if it's not a surprise. But yeah, it's something you have to be aware of as a lead software developer, that sometimes you have to be the bringer of some bad news, I think. What's the frequency you do this? Yeah, basically anytime that the company desires this, and that's mostly like once every 6 or 12 months. So now back to more fun things, because I don't enjoy formal peer reviews. That's finding trainings, and I think any software developer should be on the lookout for any skills that they can pick up through training or conferences or any other like structured way of teaching. And but just in case if your team members don't, make sure that you nudge them to improve. Make sure that you suggest something they could work at. Make training a regular topic with your business sponsors and managers, and especially make sure that you know what money you can spend on specific things, because quite often as a lead developer you change from your individual learning budget that you can like ask for permission to go to a conference or ask permission to go to a training. You can all of a sudden talk with your business sponsor and say, hey, I think we as a group should do a training on such and such a topic. And then instead of one individual going off to a training, you could have like an on-site or an off-site training with all the software developers. And all of a sudden, this training is not on the individual's budget, but it's on the project budget. And that's very much interesting for everybody, because it's basically you learn something and it's not on your personal training budget. So you still get to go to those cool conferences that you get to handpick yourself. And it's very much appreciated quite often by your team members if you can tell them that, hey, we talked about this topic and now we've arranged the training for all of us to make sure that we can get better at this specific technology or this skill or whatever that you need as a team of individuals. Yeah, and especially as a lead software developer, because you have this bird's eye view of the project and everybody's skill sets, make sure that you keep an eye out for any gaps in knowledge or skill that might be there, and try and plug those holes with either training, coaching, mentoring, or whatever, so that people get better at the areas that you want them to get better. So that the whole team as a group benefits, because those lapses in skills are not there anymore. Also, a big part of it is actively sharing knowledge. Some companies have these specific events for that. But you can think of a number of things, like presenting early design documentation. It's very much fun that if you have somebody dedicated to visual design of your product, so a UX or design individual, that they share, okay, this is what we're going to do next quarter, and that they just show what's happening, and that you then can already, like, in the time set for that discussion, have some like freewheeling on how this could be implemented, what challenges might be in there, some things that could crop up when you want to implement such a feature. For instance, if you want to do chat, now you can go back and you can say, hey, well, I know this company that can do a really awesome implementation for a chat in days instead of months. Just a suggestion. But also mob programming. Who has ever done mob programming here? Not a lot of people. It's basically pair programming, but then with a whole room. It's quite weird if you do it first time, but if you have a technical problem that you just cannot get through, then just book a meeting room, get like 5 people in there, and tell them we're doing a mob programming session and we won't get out of the room for coffee if we have at least a basic solution for the problem that you're going to explain then and there. And then basically somebody's typing, but the entire room is telling this person what they should be typing in their editor. And there's some more information about that available online. And I know John Reed, he's someone who does a lot of unit testing for iOS developers. It's one of his core principles and core ways of teaching in his training course, and it works really well. But also code reviews. Sometimes you have to do a code review because of whatever reasons you can come up with. But sometimes you also want to do a code review just because something is complex and you want to share with the rest of your team what challenges you were able to solve and how you were able to achieve the goals with either a clarity of coding or with minimal lines of codes or whatever. But also brainstorming on harder topics, so future directions of the product, so it's ideation, how to deal with technical debt, because probably every project with some longevity has these areas in the code base that is like, probably you want to put up a sign which says dragons live here, do not enter, or there's like these sections of code, there's like comments on it, do not touch. Those are most likely the biggest opportunities for dealing with technical debt, but quite often software developers have a tendency to think, yeah, we can just rewrite the things, right? But there's so much knowledge embedded in a code base that you have to be very careful when you do that. And that's why it's good to do it with a number of people, and especially the people who were involved with implementing it. Also with these knowledge sharing sessions, anyone is welcome, even non-technical people, because quite often they can ask like a silly question, maybe, but actually this question that they then ask is very much an opportunity to be able to think outside of the box and also consider, why is this individual asking this question? Is it just sheer unfamiliarity with the topic, the technology, or just coding, or is it something that is like a concern that is valid and that needs to be addressed, right? And it's something I think you do every week, every sprint, whatever your work process is. So that was a bit about your team, and now I'm going into a bit about the business. I think what's very much important as a software developer to understand is that a business is about achieving a goal, in part through your efforts. It's a group of people working as a collective, but there's a grander goal of either making money as a business. If you're a non-profit, you want to improve the world in some way. But it basically means for most people, the basics are you get paid and you provide time and effort, right? It's a transaction. And as long as this transaction is valid, so the revenue is good, so there's profit, it's all fine. If there's no profit, things can turn sour quite quickly. But within a business, it's also about managing expectations. And I think as a software developer, you have a big role to play there, especially as a lead software developer. Because if a business sponsor comes at you and says, hey, I want to implement X in Y amount of time, and you think that's impossible, but then the thing you do is, yes, we will do that, you're in trouble, because instead of helping the business achieve their goals, you're actually setting up the business for failure. Because it's very valuable for a business that if they are asking you to do something that is either improbable, impossible, or it is possible, but it would just cost more time and effort. And you don't do that by just saying yes to everything and agreeing and smiling all day, because a business is about making money. And if you just say yes all the time and try to achieve the impossible, the business in the end will not make money. And a business not making money doesn't have the money to pay you, so you're out of a job. In the end, the long run. But of course, if you work at a bank or an insurance company, they have quite a lot of breathing room, of course. So managing expectations. So be very aware of the gap between technical individuals and business people, because businesses, they think in profit, market share, conversion. So that's the top of funnel that you hear them talking about, all kinds of marketing terms that you'd like, yeah, but what are they on about? Why are we dealing with a funnel? We're dealing with clients and people, right? Well, there's a process involved there, and it's very educational to just go to these sales guys or girls and go to these marketing people and ask them, hey, what are you guys talking about? I hear funnel, I hear some conversion going on, so you're telling me that we need to reach 10,000 people to get 10 new clients. It's stuff like that. And it's very much something that is different compared to software development, because as a software developer, you have very clear goals. You have a ticket, you do some code, you test the ticket, you're done. Next ticket. So as a software developer, you think in terms of finite tasks, you think in terms of lines of code. So there's a big gap there. And as a lead software developer, one of the big things that you need to do is make sure that you bridge that gap. And of course, businesses want to make money, and they usually do that by coming up with an idea and then defining a plan of achieving that idea. And any plan requires feedback. So if there's concerns, don't be a yes man. If you have concerns, tell them. If there are risks that you see, some technology not being stable, tell them. If there's unseen dependencies that are involved, dependencies like some sort of a service or some sort of a framework that you need to interact with, tell them. Because tell them about what ifs. So what if, for instance, Amazon fails as a company? Not very likely, but it's something you could think about, especially if you work with a smaller service provider like Stream. Because if we fall over, what happens with your chat implementation, right? Not that we're falling over or anything, but so it's about managing expectations and making sure that if you see that there's incorrect expectations, that you correct that. And of course, software development is not a finite task. Things happen. A plan is just a plan, and that's very important to know for yourself, but also to make sure that your surroundings, so your team, but also the business understands that. I can do all these kinds of quotes of this Chinese general or something, that a plan is out the window the moment you start a war. Same holds for software development. The moment that you start working on a plan, you notice that the plan needs to be ever so slightly different. But most of all, make sure that you never accept an imposed duration of a plan, because who here has ever executed a project or an implementation of something that ahead of time it was told it will take a month, and you actually took a month? Can I see some hands for that? it's even less hands than my previous question, so I think that proves my point, that it's very hard as software developers to define a certain task to take a certain amount of time, because there's so many variables, so many unforeseen things you have to take into account. Also, make sure that as a lead software developer to your project surroundings that you advocate for your team, because to do the work right, you need certain software, you need the hardware of a specific level, you need the training I talked about, and you need time to learn. And also, you just need time to be able to implement things in a reasonable fashion. So make sure that you understand the effects of getting off track, because that's the plan going wrong, right? I think it should never be a solution to work harder or longer, like overtime, to try and still hang on to this plan. If a plan looks like it's failing, adjust the plan, discover why it is failing, and act accordingly. So if you accept overtime or working harder, I think as a lead developer, it's on you that it happens, and you need to be educating the business better that that's not how software development works. Also, what you need to do as a lead software developer is making sure that what the business asks of you and what the people on the other end implementing, that they understand each other. And this understanding is done through specifications. So probably it's not something that you as an individual can do very well. Quite often there's a specialist involved, so like a business analyst who does all the specification of the things that a business needs, but then there's still the step of you looking at these specifications and trying to make heads or tails of this and try and understand if this is actual something that you can convert into tasks that can be put on your Jira board or whatever you're using for your process, right? So as I mentioned, understanding specifications is hard, but it's very, very important, because if you do not understand what the business is asking of you, you're just building the wrong thing, right? And if you're building the wrong thing, you're just wasting money. So make sure that you discuss the specifications with your team, but also with the business sponsors, and if that person is involved, a business analyst. But be aware that talking about specifications to business people or to developers, there's a big difference there, because business people, they talk in terms of outcome. What does this actually bring to the business? While software developers, they really look, okay, you want me to build this, how am I going to build this? What do I need? Do I need a database? Do I need to have some sort of flexible storage somewhere? Do I need block storage on Amazon? What do I need? And that's a big thing that you have to be very much aware of, that you're talking about the same thing, but still it's a different discussion. And there's one group of people that you really want to talk to, and that's the people supporting the software, because it's so often that software is being developed and then it's finished, but then the true cost of the software starts, because I don't know if you're aware of the statistics, but the most money on software is spent after it's been created. So that's the support phase, when it's actually running, when people are waking up in the middle of the night because something is not working. Talk with these people that do the support. If you are lucky, you do the support yourself. I'm not sure if that's lucky, but if you are the one doing the support yourself as a group of software developers, there's much more attention being paid to the actual support work, the support load on this software. So if you're not doing it yourself, make sure to talk to these people, and also make sure that you understand what they need, and that you also accept some of the requests that they put in to your software package, so that they can have a fighting chance of supporting what you throw over the fence, right? But also, with your business sponsors, you need to fight for technical progress, because businesses, they think, okay, I got a software implemented, I got features, we're done, right? But I don't know exactly how this works on the server end, but on the iOS end, there's like a new device every year, a new framework being released, and at some point, if you do not touch the code, then Apple just outright says, okay, you're using such an old SDK, we're not running that anymore, so we throw it out the store. You have to do the upkeep, you have to do the updating of the code base to the current standards, so that the life of the software is extended as much as possible until there's no business value to the software anymore. But the problem there is reworking existing functionality is quite often, it sounds like a really bad business case, because we got something and we're doing something to keep the same. So why am I paying money for that? I already got it. Why should I spend money on it? try and explain that to somebody with the budget. And if you're able to do that and you have some good notes on that, on how you can do that successfully, please come talk to me, because I want to know your secret. Because it's hard. And it's, I think, one of the hardest things I have to do as a lead software developer, to make sure that the code base stays current, stays up to date. Because I've been working with an iOS code base in my previous role that was already 5 years old. And at some point, we just had to throw out big chunks of functionality because it was written in such an old way that we just couldn't bring it into the future again. And we had to just re-implement it totally from scratch. And if you want to talk about wasting money, that's probably the most stupid thing you can do with software, is just outright throw something out and re-implement the same thing. You want to be able to bring this bit of code into your future. So very important, keep explaining, even if you think everybody understands it, why it is important to pay down technical debt. It's just something, if you don't do that continuously, it works like debt in real life with money. At some point, the debt is so big, you just can't carry it anymore, and the only thing you can do is default and basically give up, because that's basically what bankruptcy means. Financially, you have to give up because you cannot manage anymore. And the same holds true with technical debt in software development. If the debt is too big, there's no fighting chance anymore for you. You just cannot pay it down ever again, because the interest on this debt is so high. You're better off just throwing it out and building totally from scratch, which is of course very fun to do, greenfield development. So could work in your favor sometimes, but be careful with that one. Yeah, this is a little bit of a different take of what I talked before. As I already mentioned, specifications, talking about that with business sponsors is different. You have to explain implications. So keeping up on a technical level on the code base, it has some implications for the future of the code base. And you have to get acceptance. I think I was like half asleep when I typed this slide, I think. So, but you have to talk in terms of cost and benefit, because I don't even know what the second bullet is about. It's not even a coherent sentence, so we'll fix that. So, but with the technical progress and the business sponsors, you have to make sure that you talk in terms of cost and benefits. And that's the discussion I shared with you before, that, okay, business, do you want us to like not touch this at all and then take like a big financial cost hit by just throwing this thing outright? Or do you want us to keep it up to date and make sure that we can bring this code base into the future? That's the core of this slide. So fighting for technical progress, businesses, they work with numbers, right? I don't know if you ever get a suit in your team room. They always present these bar graphs and pie charts. I don't know what they do with these numbers, but it all seems like a jumble. So they need numbers, and they preferably have it in a nice graph. And if there's one thing true about statistics, you have lies, you have damn lies, and you have statistics, right? Because anything that you put in the graph, you can do some nice visual trickery with it, and all of a sudden you can make it look exactly the way that you need for your business to be influenced by what you're showing them. Just make sure you don't tell an outright lie in your graphs, because we all seen these graphs, like it's like the bars are actually this big, and if you then look, if you see the whole graph, then the difference at the top is quite small. But what they then do is cut out the bottom like 100%. Then all of a sudden, the differences that you see at the top are huge, and you think, oh my God, we're in trouble. But it's actually just a fraction of a percentile difference. And yeah, it's just by cutting out specific areas of a graph. Just look for it. Every time you see a graph in the news, in the newspaper, online, try and look for these signs. You will be surprised how often graphical representation of numbers are actually like edited in such a way that they actually show what the intentions of the creator of this graph actually are, instead of being an honest representation of the truth. So, but you can use that skill in your own advantage as well. So we talked about the team, the business, and now we're going to talk about you. So you take care of your team. You work hard to keep the business sponsors happy. And so we talked about that in the previous section, really. And so the previous two sections. And you want some tips to keep yourself happy and productive. Because being a lead software developer quite often is overwhelming for for your workload, because not only are you doing software development, you're also having to keep up with all the meetings and all the input that's coming your way, input, advice, help, things you need to do. So being able to delegate to your team members is one of your biggest assets. So make sure that you do that. And I want to go over a few practical things that will be useful to help you keep sane, to help you stay sane, and that will also be smart things for you to do, even if you're not in a leadership position as a software developer just yet. First of all, note-taking. It's an underappreciated skill. Just a pencil and paper block is fine. Don't go too fancy. I did that in the beginning, and then I just didn't want to take notes because, yeah, it was such a waste of the paper, right? So I got cheaper note block, and I was doing more note-taking. It's an external storage for your ideas. It allows you to do more focus work because you can get things out of your head. But you have to make sure that you process your notes regularly. There's also one thing that is called scheduling your own time. Not only do you want to track what you're doing each week, but you want to optimize things, so like cluster meetings on specific days or specific areas of your calendar. And if there's one tip that you can take home from this presentation that you should implement tomorrow, that is to schedule meetings with yourself, with nobody else, on times of a day that you want to be uninterrupted and do focus time. Because I don't know what it is like with you people, but if there's like a block of time blocked in my calendar, nobody touches it. And just do that. Just on like every day or a few days of the week, block meetings with yourself of like 3 or 4 hours, and you will be surprised of how much focus time you will get back by doing so. Learning. So as a lead software developer, you might spend less time coding, but you have to stay up to date. So find a nice aggregating resource for you, like a podcast or a digest or a newsletter, something that just gives like a nice overview of this week's newsletters or news articles. Find the weaknesses in your current and future role, develop those, and make sure that you ask people in your surroundings with the informal peer reviews of what you're doing right, and especially what you can do better. So think coaching, mentoring, presenting, negotiating skills, things that you can use to help other people, because that's the skills that will really help you along in your career, because we can all code. And then there's communicating. Email, I only check it 2 or 3 times a day. So I have noticed that if there's an email that requests your input, if you just leave it for a few hours, things magically solve themselves. So use that to your advantage. Turn off inbox notification. It's fine to keep appointment reminders because nobody wants to be late for the next meeting. And same holds true for Slack or any other team comms that you have in place. Treat it like email, but shorter. If there's any specific people you have to respond to quickly, make them a VIP or some sort of a marker you can put on them so that they do get a notification. If there's a big message, make sure that you put it on a wiki, because then you can do comments and change tracking. Even Google Docs is better than just a long email then. And yeah, meetings, just always be prepared, always be on time. Meetings, you have to keep them on topic. If somebody pops off a big tangent, make another meeting out of it. And all meetings should start on time and end with plenty of time remaining, because never forget the power of silence. Yeah, I can just quickly wrap this up. I will share my slides afterwards. And I know you were expecting a GIF or image. Please, in that last section, who was expecting an image or some animated GIF there? Just a few. So that wraps up the 3 focus areas. And so the conclusion, I wrote all this down in my book, so that's why I can quickly go over the last bit, because I noticed that I'm out of time. So be aware of the 3 focus areas. That's the team, the business, and you need to support all 3 of them as a lead software developer. And I just want to mention it again, schedule that focus time in your own calendar. You will be surprised about how well this would actually work. And then I want to ask, are there any questions? Okay, because then I want to share a nice thank you and a big old QR code. I will share my slides afterwards on that link. And there's also some buttons there that will give you a nice discount on this book if you want to read about all of this afterwards. And I want to thank you for your time.